Reading for today from Alana, Fairchild, Crystal Stars. Crystalline activations with the stellar light codes. Let's begin. Chapter 18, Supreme Spiritual Protection, Star Guide, Alpha Centauri. As our sun's closest star system, Alpha Centauri is just over 4 light years away. It consists of a binary pair, Alpha Centauri A and Alpha Centauri B, and the smaller Proxima Centauri. Proxima Centauri is Earth's closest star after the Sun. Alpha Centauri A is a yellow star, much like our Sun. Alpha Centauri B is an orange star, and Proxima Centauri is a red dwarf, roughly 7 times smaller than our Sun. All 3 stars are around 4.85 billion years old, which makes them slightly older than our 4.6 billion year old Sun. One of the star medicines Alpha Centauri offers is the ability to find like-minded people and other forms of spiritual support right under our noses. Sometimes what we need is much closer to home than we realize. Whilst I am a big believer in the positive effects of travel for the mind and the soul, and I love a good adventure, there are times when we don't need to go looking for an experience or an answer, as we have what we need within reach. Alpha Centauri reminds us that the spiritual resources we need will always be there for us and are in fact closer than we realize. When this star guide makes a connection with the soul, it means that help or whatever is needed is close at hand. Alpha Centauri looks like a solitary star when viewed with the naked eye. It was only in 1689, after the invention of the telescope, that astronomers saw it as an orbiting pair. Proxima Centauri wasn't spotted until 1915. Alpha Centauri is in the southern part of the sky and is not visible all the time to all people. Beyond 29 degrees north, including most of the USA, Alpha Centauri only rises a few degrees above the horizon. So, in much of the northern hemisphere, it is difficult to see in any but the darkest skies. In the southern hemisphere, Alpha Centauri is circumpolar, so it can be viewed the whole year around. It is one of the pointer stars for the Southern Cross constellation. Alpha Centauri teaches us that even when we cannot see it in the physical sense, sources of spiritual light are always shining upon us and having an effect in our world. We can go through times when we might feel ignored or rejected by spirit, or that we have lost contact in some way. This is an example of projecting or parental issues onto the divine. The universe never rejects us. Spirit never abandons us. And yet we all know there can be times when it feels that way. Alpha Centauri guides us to remember that even when the sun is covered by clouds, it is still shining and providing what is needed for life. Its light is not as clear from our perspective, but it is constant. There is also the guidance that when we go beneath the surface of things, we are more able to see the constant light of the universe shining in our lives. Whether or not we see the workings of spiritual grace in our lives is a matter of our perspective, not a matter of whether it is there. When this star connects with the soul, hidden connections will come to light. This can refer to spiritual connections on earthly relationships. This star teacher guides us to recognize that feeling alone and being alone are two different things. You may have become overly focused on the absence of certain people in your life, on loss or on grief. Whilst that is a legitimate element of a healing process, Alpha Centauri knows when it is time to gently encourage the soul to recognize the helping hands reaching out to it, and that it is okay to acknowledge that and let people in. According to Eratosthenes, who wrote of the constellations in the 3rd century BCE, this star group depicts the mythological figure of Chiron. A fascinating figure, Chiron is a noble centaur and is skillful but wounded healer. He rose above the violent and basal nature of his fellow centaurs. With divine parents, he was no ordinary centaur. His remarkable nature was loving, wise, and gentle, the opposite of what one would expect from a typical aggressive centaur. Chiron demonstrates an ability to rise above the ways of one's own species. His divine parentage imbued him with finer traits. Our divine parentage is our spiritual nature, no matter what ourselves, and for the human collective, especially in those moments where we may love humans but despair of humanity. As a gifted oracle and revered teacher, Chiron also fulfilled the spiritual role of a savior and gave his life to save that of another being. He is known as the wounded healer because even as a master of healing arts, he could not heal the fatal wound that took his life. The story goes that he then joined the constellations as a bearer of light. The commonalities with the Christ story are striking. For example, at the time of his crucifixion, Jesus was jeered at because as the Savior, he should be able to save himself. Chiron is an astrological emanation of the universal Christ consciousness. Chiron is present in the astrology chart of every human. His presence refers to the deep wounds of the soul that we all work through during our lifetime, in our own individual ways. Often these wounds are the source through which we develop skills. Having an absent father may open the way for someone to have a powerful spiritual relationship to the Divine Father, because no human man ever intercepted that role. For example, the wound of an abandonment needs to be resolved, but at the same time, the skill for prayer or channeling spiritual guidance may be put to a higher use. When Alpha Centauri connects with the soul. It emanates chironic wisdom to remind us that we don't have to be perfect to be able to help others. It guides us not to fall into the trap of denying our vulnerabilities. I sometimes see this tendency in healers who believe they shouldn't have needs of their own, as their greater purpose is to serve others. They confuse service with self-abnegation. Eventually, they become tired, sometimes with chronic health issues. They are like the wounded Chiron. They finally face the truth that a dry well cannot water the garden. Learning to embrace one's own needs helps us become full enough to nourish others. I have created a download on my website called Healing the Healer. If you would like to explore these ideas further, Chiron teaches us to have compassion, not to demand that we be other than we are, and what we can be, that we can be healers who have their own pains to deal with and still make offerings to the world. The unconscious Chiron tries to project their issues out onto the world and focuses on healing others when they would gain more and give more by working on themselves. The conscious Chiron learns from his or her wounds, grows in skillfulness through the process, and even with his or her vulnerabilities and frailties can make powerful offerings that help others in many ways. The conscious Chiron martyrs themselves. The conscious Chiron devotes their lives to a higher and helpful calling while acknowledging that they are human beings with legitimate human needs. Chiron's wisdom is about rising above our lower nature of ego and aggression to align with the heart-infused soul that is within us. It is a journey that takes courage, is not always graceful, but benefits many, including ourselves. Each one of us has an astrological transit known as Chiron return at around age 50, when Chiron returns to the point in its orbit where it was at the time of our birth. We can revisit our early wounding to either confront them for the first time if we are beginning our inner work journey, or experience them from a higher turn of the wisdom spiral. We can revisit those issues in a completely new way and potentially unlock their hidden blessings with more clarity and peace. In its wisdom and compassion, Alpha Centauri helps us access the divine resources within us. Find the divine blessings within our human journey and realize that nurturing ourselves can help us access the true depth and value of all we can share with the world. Alpha Centauri helps us access the divine resources within us, find the divine blessings within our human journey, and realize that nurturing ourselves can help us access the true depth and value of all we can share with the world.